Good afternoon, early evening. It's afternoon. I feel like it's evening. It's early
Yeah.
evening.
Yes.
We both had to like go find lip gloss, lipstick, because we can't come on here looking ashy for y'all good people. Uh, so excited to be in space with you, to be having conversations with you. So excited. We are both sending our text messages, our invites out, inviting people to join us for this conversation. This should be a good one. I feel like they all are going to always be a good one, but this is also a good one. So invite your people. Um, Send this to your people, especially those folks who are entering college, those folks who are considering PhD programs, those folks who, again, I don't even know what I'm doing in my life, and this may be a conversation that you just want to be a part of. So we're gonna take a few more seconds and send our last text messages out to people, inviting folks to join us. And one of the things that we do is we post this on our social media and we share after the fact. So for folks who miss us live, they can absolutely still join this conversation. So if you miss it live and you get this conversation, share it. Share it with 10 of your friends, 10 of your people you barely even mess with. Send it to them too. Because we're having some good conversations here. We just want to make sure that folks are able to get this information. Happy hump day. We are almost through this week. I don't know where time goes. Like, I feel like January is like, oh, Happy New Year. And then it just, February, I feel like January go on for forever. And then February is over like
February goes by really fast.
It goes by like you blink and you have missed all of the Black History stuff. You have missed all of it and it's over. And then March kind of trucks along for me. So we're gonna see. I hope it picks up. I know so far it definitely feels like it has been going so fast. So I don't know. My concept of time is all messed up thanks to COVID. But in any case, hey y'all, for those of you who are able to join us or join us live, hey there, how you doing? So happy to be in space with you. For those of you who are watching us after the fact, hey, we love you too. We definitely want to invite and encourage you all to make it to some live streamings. We would love to have your comments and engagement throughout the conversation. So just wanted to make space for that. For those of you who do not know, I am Tanisha Jointer. I am the founder of Invested Consulting Firm. And at Invested Consulting Firm, we provide customized training to community partners and school districts across the country that typically focus on healing center practices, and some trauma awareness, but definitely customizable learning, depending on folks' readiness. I love to tell my clients that, like, what are you ready for? What conversations are y'all really ready to have? And what are you as an organization really ready to do? Because I don't want to lead folks down some like, this is what you should do, and your administration is completely against it. So that's what we do at Investor Consulting Firm. These kind of conversations series really started with my team and I having some conversations about what were we going to do to celebrate Black History Month. And we decided, like, you know what? You have a stupidly dope network, right? And why not tap into that network? Y'all know one of my favorite quotes is your network is your net worth. And so really thinking about who is in my network and how can I leverage their knowledge, their skills, their capacity, and have them engage in this conversation. Because I feel like I know a bunch of folks who were for February making Black history. And then as we got to March, I said, why not keep the party going? I know so many amazing women who are doing, I mean, killing the game in their industries, right? And I was like, boom, let me hit up all my girls. And here you are. And I thank you so much for, like, yes, I will do this for you, with you, because I am so happy to have you here with me. And with that, I will turn the floor over to you, Doctor. Okay. All of my friends that are getting PhD or have attained PhDs, you are doctor in my phone. My children will call you Dr. Auntie because that's just In the words of my friend Shannon, you would her son's godmother is Dr. Brittany. So I was like, you know what, you
Nice.
were right. You have earned that title, so they'll be Dr. Aunties. Without further ado, Dr. Lamesha Brown. Woo!
Yes. Hello. Yes, thank you so much for inviting me to take part in this series. It's an honor to be able to be with you and talk more with you, but to have a platform to talk more about, what I do and my experiences.
Great. So I'm just going to give you the floor. I want to invite you to just share again, just who you are, what do you do, and lastly, how did you even get here?
So, again, I am Dr. Lamesha Brown. I am an educator. I'm specifically in the field of higher education. And so my work focuses in on student success, right? So, in the field of higher education and thinking about recruiting students to institutions, a lot of times we do so much to recruit students. And then once they get there, it's like, all right, you on your own. And so for me, I really focus on and think a lot about what is that student experience like once they get to the college campus, and what are we as an institution doing to support students to ensure that they're able to successfully complete, right? Because it's not helpful if they can get there, but that they can't finish their degree and be able to achieve the things that they really want to achieve. And so that's kind of like a quick little blurb on that. But I'm also a financial coach. I work one-on-one with folks who are really wanting to get their finances in order. Ultimately, right, folks who are looking to create a budget, to increase their savings, eliminate debt, and plan for the future. And then I'm also a speaker and facilitator around topics related to like college access, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and so forth. So how I got here, I will say I never thought that I would have a PhD. Like initially, it wasn't something that I aspired towards. Like I was a first generation college student. I come from a low income background. I have two older siblings, a younger sibling, but neither of them went to college before me. Neither of my parents went to college by the time I had gotten there, right? And so when I was in high school, and I'm from Washington State, that's where I was raised, we had the Bill and Melinda Gates Achiever Scholarship. Okay. So they actually provided funding to schools within 2 counties in Washington State, and my high school was one that got it. So I'm like, okay, I am introverted, but I need to apply. I need to go through this interview process because I need this money to go to college. Like there's no other way to be able to pay fully for this experience. And so I, went through that process, got the scholarship, which was amazing because what it did was it ensured that beyond like the Pell Grant, SEOG grant, that I was able to like go to school completely for free. So my undergraduate degree was completely free because of financial aid, because of grants, but because of this Achiever Scholarship that I earned. I was an apparel merchandising major in undergrad. I was one of those students who actually never changed my major once. If you are, a college student, or if you've been to college or know anything about the college experience, it is common for students to change their major multiple times. But while I never changed my major, it was my senior year where I'm like, you know what? I want to do something that I felt would be more meaningful. And at that time, I didn't think it was fashion. And so everything I thought about revolved around working with youth in some way, right? I thought about being a teacher, a guidance counselor, a career counselor at a high school, really thinking about the relationships I had with people and those who made the greatest impact on me, up to that time. And so student affairs tends to be that field that you don't choose, it chooses you.
Mhm.
because most of us who went into the field didn't know that this was a field, right? This was something you
Yeah.
could actually study. We usually interact with someone who is doing the work who says like, "Hey, you'd be really great at um, doing this, so you should go on and get a master's degree." Most entry level roles in student affairs requires you to have a master's degree. And so I took a couple of years out just trying to figure out life, figure out what I wanted to do because I was applying for grad schools and waiting to hear back. And, I wound up getting into a master's program at Valdosta State University, which is in South of Georgia. By that time, I was in the state of Georgia. And so for me, that was the first time I think I really felt like I was doing something that was meaningful, right? With what I was learning about college students, about their experience, about their development, and getting experiences in different functional areas by way of internships and graduate assistantships. And so for me, that's what kind of solidified my future, which would be in this field of higher education. Um, After that, I went on to work at Spelman College, which is a historically Black college for women in
Shout out
Atlanta.
HBCUs. Whoop whoop.
Yes. I didn't get an experience of attending one because, in Washington State, we don't
That's
have
right.
HBCUs.
Right.
And so it was a dream come true to be able to actually work at Spelman College. And, I had friends when I was younger. We saw a music video back in the day and they were at Spelman. So we was like, yeah, we're all going to go to Spelman. And when I got the job, I was like, hey, y'all, we made it. Like, this is how we made it. But I'm working here. We made it.
Let's
But
do this. Let's reenact this video, y'all.
Right, but I worked in housing and residence life. And so this is the functional area that focuses on student development within, residence halls. Um, Great first experience. Res Life gives you a lot of different opportunities to gain skills in supervision, conflict management, crisis management,
Mhm.
programming, all of those things. And I loved it. And so after 3 years of working at Spelman, and because those GRE scores were about to expire, I knew that I wanted to go on to pursue my PhD. And so, I kind of did this process of applying, trying to do some research, figuring out where I wanted to apply to. Finances were a thing, right? So I was like, okay, I can't apply to more than one school within the same pay period because I needed to be
Yeah.
strategic financially. And so I applied to 3 schools. I only got into one, which was the University of Georgia, but I would say that that was a great choice for me. And I was extremely grateful to be able to have like that educational experience. Again, had a graduate assistantship in housing, so I continued to work in housing, focusing on like staff development. But this was my chance to go deeper in my learning as it related to the college student experience, especially as it related to like diversity, equity, and inclusion, social identities, how that impacts students' experiences, and then just kind of further solidified student success kind of as an overall area that I was focusing in on. And so, um, well, I'll talk more definitely about that college experience because it was extremely hard.
Mm.
And for anyone who is considering pursuing a doctoral degree, I definitely have stories to share and tips to share and things just for you to consider. But it took me 4.5 years to complete my PhD. I decided to leave my job full time and focus on being a full time student just because for me, I knew I needed really just all of the time to be able to focus in on my academics. And I didn't think that I'd be able to manage well working full time
Yeah.
and being a student because ultimately, being a doctoral student is full time, whether you work full time or part time. So that can be a misconception for folks too. Um, but yeah, after kind of towards the end, I finished coursework, moved to the state of Minnesota. Very cold, but I've had some really great opportunities since being in this state. And I would say, moving here while there was a lot about it that was really difficult,
Yeah.
there were a lot of gains from a professional standpoint that I've experienced since being here. So overall, I am again grateful for that experience, though. Kind of long answer, but that's kind of an overview, and then I'll of course share more detail.
No, you know what? I think it was a necessary answer, right? Because it took us on a journey, right? We got to gain some insight on your journey, your experience. Notes that I kind of jotted down because
Mhm.
I love making sure that our young people. So those of you who have students who are going to college, those of you who have some high school students, and I'd even say if you have some eighth graders who are thinking about what they want to do with their life, here's some things some nuggets that I felt like you shared us in that journey. Was one, you can have a plan, but be open to a calling, actually calling you, right, and listening to that. I too went to a PWI. And I had a plan going into college, and totally shifted careers. Like my profession. Shout out to school social workers too. This is School Social Worker Appreciation Week, so shout out to my school social workers. This is also Social Work Appreciation Month, so shout out to all social workers. But like the profession chose me. So young people know that you can have an idea of what you want to do, but be open to anything else that may come your way. um, Another nugget that I heard was, um, you were introverted, but you still knew that you needed to apply for scholarships. And that's really big for our young people. A lot of our young people um, tend to have better social skills, right? And when I say social skills, I'm talking about uh, online world, right? The TikToks, the Snapchats, the Instagram, right? All of those spaces, our young people are living and thriving and doing that thing in that space. But in real life, right, our young people are like, I want to network. I don't want to talk to somebody. And so young people encouraging you that like, while it may not be something that you feel the most comfortable or the most confident in, taking that leap of faith, jumping out there and trying to engage with folks who can help you, who can give you, open up a door an inch, open up a window an inch, will definitely go the long haul. So be willing to be vulnerable in that way. And then that networking, you talked a lot about student affairs and how it chose you. And I think you're 100% spot on with that. Like, I know people who have gone into the student affair world, and it's literally about like getting in that space, like knowing that that's available for you. And it's so many professions that I think young folks of color, especially depending on communities that we're coming from, right? We don't even know what's possible for us because we don't see us in those spaces. And I think, again, I'm so grateful for you being a PhD holder and like, hey, I want to make sure that people that look like me know that me exists and they know my story and my journey. So, again, big up to you. And those are the nuggets that I heard. So, if you again have a young person, make sure you share this video with them, because we want to make sure that young people have the love and the support that they need as they transition into this higher ed space. Um, my second question that I have for you is really about that preparation part. So, having worked in the student affairs world, what do you find is like the biggest skill that parents, educators can give to young people to prepare them for that world? I know that wasn't on my list of questions, but
Mhm.
you brought it up. So
No,
you
no, no. No, absolutely. I think that's a great question. Um, because look, I mean, when students go to college, for many of them, this is their very first time being away
mm,
from family. And it's really hard. Like, we can't underestimate how difficult that transition from high school to college is for so many people, especially if you go like across state lines or if you go hours away from home. For example, my undergraduate institution, Washington State University, was 6 hours away from my home.
wow.
in Western Washington. I did not have a vehicle. I wasn't driving back and forth. So the only time that I went home was on breaks,
Yeah.
right? And if you know about, the timeline of higher education, like fall, you might not be going home until Thanksgiving break. So
Mm-hmm.
that's a really long time, especially for a first year student to be away from home in a new environment, navigating, right? Um, I feel like what teachers, educators in high school, parents, family members can do to kind of help students prepare is to have those conversations related to resources on a college campus. So
Mm-hmm.
for me, my first year was extremely difficult, especially the first semester. That transition, being away from home, learning how to be a college student, which is really hard because academically it's very different. I had to learn that I can't study the night before an exam and expect to do well. So, like all of my first exams that first semester were D's and F's. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
ooh, okay, this is not what I'm used to.
Mm-hmm.
It's really hard. I, reflecting back, feel like I was probably dealing with a little bit of depression as well. Um, and I spent so much time by myself, so much time in my room. I had some friends who, you're kind of navigating, interpersonal relationships. I was kind of opinionated and I said something that they didn't like. They stopped talking to me. And so those two friends weren't my friends anymore. And so then there's like that extra piece of it of like, okay, I'm alone. I'm far away from home. Academically, things aren't going so well. And I didn't seek help. And so I think like making sure students know, okay, there are counseling centers on campus that you're not paying for because this is a part of the student fees that you pay. There are resident assistants in your residence hall that you could go to and talk to learn more about resources, or there's usually tutoring services, all of these things. And I think helping to normalize that ahead of time, because for students who do well academically, they may feel like, I don't need a tutor. Like I've never had to use tutoring services, so that's not something for me. But letting students know like that's a normal part of the college experience, it's a normal part of being successful as a student, is using the resources that are on a college campus. So that's one of the like things that come to mind overall about how we can better prepare students for college for that transition, because it is really hard.
I don't think I've ever thought about that transition being like this really hard thing, right? As an extrovert, right? I was like, yes, I'm gone, right? Also, I was only like 45 minutes away from home too. So then there's that. Um, but I that definitely makes sense though. Like the young people that I know who had gone to college and come home for various reasons. I think a lot of those reasons were centered around just like not knowing what to do, not knowing what resources were available to them, not knowing how to navigate that. And I think
Mhm.
oftentimes, depending on the home that a child comes from, your parents are navigating that. They are setting up the appointments, they're doing all the things for you. And so this is the first time in your life that you have some type of freedom and autonomy. And so what I
Mhm.
feel like I hear you also saying is like, hey, let's start giving our young people some freedom, some autonomy, the opportunity to create and make choices. Let's give them options in how we are presenting content and how we're expecting them to prepare, right?
Mhm.
So I think that's super important for parents to hear and to know. Sometimes we like we're on them, we're on top of them, we are hovering them, we're helicoptering them, and then we just drop them off and go. And that's definitely not the way. So thank you so much for that.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Um, I'm like percolating on that. Like, that is so true. Like, things that I wish I knew.
Mhm.
And also, like, taking advantage of those free resources, i.e., your tuition is paying for on campus. Like, there's so many supports on the college campus that young people don't even know that's available for them. So, young people, as you get to your college campus, you go and you do a scavenger hunt of what is here on this campus and what is free and how do I access those things.
Yeah, I think about in terms of support academically, support emotionally, uh, personally or interpersonally, and then professionally, right?
Mm,
So, what are those academic supports, tutoring services, or various offices? Sometimes there are tutoring services within the residence hall, sometimes it's the physical location, so you have to find that out. But then, personally or interpersonally, there are all types of student organizations on a college campus that you can, get involved with. Most college campuses also have like a multicultural student services or identity based um, um, center. So, like my undergrad had an African American Student Center. I spent
mhm,
a lot of time in there, later became a student mentor for the African American Student Center. You have LGBTQ resource centers. You have women's centers, different identity based offices on many
mm,
campuses. Thinking about professionally, right? Career services is a very underutilized office, especially for first generation college students. So if you're the
mm.
first to go to college, your parents did not go before you, they can't tell you what to do
Very
on a
true.
college campus. Like, my mom was super supportive, but there was nothing she could tell me,
Right.
because she hadn't experienced that. And so my journey was learning everything on my own and missing a lot of, like, I never used career services in undergrad. That
Yeah.
wasn't something that I used until I was a grad student on my way out, right? Like I'm job searching
Mhm,
now, so I'm utilizing these services. And then emotionally, right? Counseling services.
mhm.
Um, and so there are various types of resources on a college campus that's really important to dig more into. And the sooner you can do it, the better.
Absolutely. So you've had experience at both PWIs and HBCU and HBCU. Um, what advice what advice or resource would you give to parents and even young people who are teetering between the two um,
Mhm.
in consideration?
Yeah, like I said, I didn't have an opportunity, and because of my scholarship, I had to stay in state at least for 2 years. And for me, I couldn't even imagine transferring after that because
For
that is
sure.
always an option for you. Like you can start one place, you don't have to stay there. If there's somewhere you really love, maybe you didn't get in the first go round, you can apply again after your first year. Like your grades are brand new, right? So if you go in, you do your thing, you really focus and get a high GPA, you can then transfer to the institution you really wanted to go to. But when you consider kind of between the two, a lot of students are going to HBCUs or minority serving institution because of that cultural experience. And for me, moving to the state of Minnesota after being in Georgia, like kind of highlights that for me, just how important that cultural experience
Mm,
is and can be for your success, right? So when we think about being successful as a student, academics are extremely important, and there are those other components socially that make a difference. So you might go to a college and you're doing very well academically, but socially you are just kind of drained. You're not going to stay in that environment. And that is absolutely okay to change your mind. And I will also say just because one college doesn't work for you doesn't mean college doesn't work for you. So I do
mm,
want to say that because I think sometimes because of messages that students receive from whoever, they feel like, well, college isn't for me. And even if you go to college and you don't do well, it's not college isn't for you. It could just be that environment wasn't really conducive for you to be successful academically. So, like, you just have to kind of weigh and consider. Now, oftentimes HBCUs don't have the same type of funding, right? A lot of HBCUs may be private, for example. Funding is based on tuition, all of these extra things. But I mean, just kind of historically, HBCUs were never funded well, and that has continued. So, um, oftentimes, a PWI, predominantly white institution, has more resources. So the types of things that you have access to or can do as a student there may be more, right? And as a student of color at a predominantly white institution, there are going to be things, unfortunately, that you're dealing with that you may not deal with at a HBCU as it relates to like microaggressions, macroaggressions, racism, all of those things, right? And if you are, for example, a Black student at an HBCU with other minoritized identities, for example, if you identify as LGBTQ or if you are religiously minoritized, right? As in you don't identify as a Christian, that may also be an environment that
Mm-hmm.
isn't going to work well for reasons outside of race.
Yeah.
And so it's just a lot of things to think about. And I think as parents and as educators, those are the types of conversations that are also needed when talking about like being able to have an experience at a HBCU, which I didn't have, but I think is amazing. And then also just the financial components of that, right? If you're going to a private institution, whether HBCU or PWI, there may or may not be the funding that you need, especially if you come from a low income background or like middle income. So it's a lot of things to kind of think about, but all really important when considering the type of institution you're going to. And then on top of that, right, do you want a small environment? Do you want to be at an institution that has a smaller class size versus do you think you could do well at a very large institution where you might be one of 200 in a
Mm-hmm.
course, right? Like those are very different fields too. So I highly encourage students, if you can, go to the college campus, go take a tour. If you are a high school student and you are going to be, you know, you're first generation, you come from a low income background and you can be involved with a trio program like Upward
Shout out to
Bound or
Trio.
educational. Yeah. And I didn't, another thing I didn't know about was trio, right? I was never in trio, but I definitely qualified in terms of my identities. But those are opportunities to be able to get out and go to different college campuses. Like my spouse worked in trio. He took students all over the place. I was always super jealous because I'm like, dang, y'all going all over. But those students had an opportunity to get outside of the state of Georgia, to go somewhere they had never seen before, many of them flying on a plane for the very first time.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's opportunities that like that can really open up your mind. Or if you're really interested in STEM, going to a STEM focused institution, or if you're interested in the arts, going to an art focused institution. So there are so many different types that it's, if you can talk with someone who is familiar with higher education kind of as a whole, it's really helpful to open up your mind.
I love that. I mean, I'm thinking to myself, like, so many things that I wish I knew before I selected a university, right? Like, I even think about just the things that I felt like I was, I don't know if I want to say it like this, but essentially like smart enough, right? The programs that I thought I was smart enough to get into, right? And the limit that I feel that was placed on me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Be it from, you know, my parent, be it from my counselors in high school, right? This idea of where I should go as opposed to like what was really out there and that was really could have been really good for me. Now, I don't regret my educational experience at all.
Mm-hmm.
I have attained a ton, and shout out to the institution that I've attended. But I again want to encourage parents to really have some honest conversation with your student, with their counselor, and if their school counselor cannot support, right, with someone who is able to support you all in thinking through what is the best type of environment, and not just HBCU or PWI, but like who is your student and where will they thrive the most. So thank you so
Mm-hmm.
much for elevating that, because I think that's important for folks to know. And let me say this, going to a junior college, no shame, no shade. Like
Yes.
sometimes that is the best way. and like don't feel and I don't, but like, let's normalize folks going to junior colleges and going into trades, because that can also be
Absolutely.
very fruitful, and rewarding and fulfilling for folks. I'm gonna
I
shift
can
our
say, oh, sorry, go ahead. Well, I was just going to say real quick, kind of based on that. For me, there was never conversations really about community and technical colleges when I was in high school. I feel like maybe that's more of a conversation now that we have with students,
Mhm.
but like I only thought about a 4 year institution, right? A university. And what I will say is, whether you decide to get a trade or if you're thinking that you want to go and start and get your associate's degree and then transfer to a 4 year institution, like you could save a lot of money doing that.
A
And if
ton of money.
finances is something that is a concern for you, then think about, okay, are you in a situation where you can spend, 2 years where you're located now? Is that something that can work for you? And you could get your associate's degree, or focus on like your liberal education courses, right? Your Englishes, your math, science, all of that, and then transfer to the university that you really have been wanting to go to. You will still have a degree that has that institution's name on it, right? So that's still good. However, you can save a lot of money within those 2 years if you
So much
start
money.
off at a junior college.
And if you're in Chicago, right, we have a lot of dual program opportunities. So folks can graduate high school with an associate's degree. And so
Mhm.
making sure that, again, we are educating our young people on and creating access roads for them, right? So they know that
Yep.
these things are available to and for you.
Absolutely.
Wanted to pivot our conversation just back to the PhD programming, because you have an organization, correct?
So we have, it is a virtual space, basically community for first generation doctoral students.
Nice. How can
Yeah.
people join and be a part of that space? What does that look like?
Yeah. So I'll share a little bit of a background related to what we're talking about is at First Gen Docs. We have accounts on Twitter. I think that's where most people are engaging. And that's where we started. So, back in my doctoral program, me and two of my friends who both identify as first generation doctoral, at this point graduates, but at that time students, we were just kind of talking about how we felt like we had a lot of spaces, particularly in our experiences, where we could talk about our blackness, right? we
Mm.
I'm really grateful that the doctoral program that I was in had a lot of black folks and a lot of black women and a number of folks who also identified as first gen, which is not the case in a lot of programs. So also, if you are thinking about graduate degrees, doctoral programs, and if that's something that's important to you, make sure you ask those questions related to the demographics of students in the program, right? And make sure you talk with students in the program and whatnot. But that's something that I did not know when I applied, but I was extremely grateful for, especially going from living on campus, working in housing at Spelman, and being around black women all the time, to then being at a predominantly white institution again. So it was great. But anyway, we talked about how we didn't really feel like there were spaces for us to really talk about our first generation identity and what that meant and what that looked like and how that experience was showing up for us in the doctoral program. Because what I will say is I've felt my first gen identity the most as a doctoral student, in
Really?
terms of kind of feeling like I didn't deserve to be there, or feeling
Mm.
like I couldn't do this. I questioned my ability more than I ever had in my
Mhm.
educational journey, which is very interesting because I had 2 degrees and I had done right school, which I could talk more about later. But anyway, so we were like, you know what? Let's create a space. And so Um, Shout out to Dr. Jason Wallace and Dr. Raven Coakley, who are the co-founders for First Gen Docs. And then also, really the idea came as a result of like a program proposal that we were doing for a conference. We're like, hey, we want to do a Twitter chat and to engage with other first gen doctoral students to really just talk about what does it mean to be first gen. That was really the start of that. Um, and I can also say shout out to Dr. Britton Williams and Dr. Joan Collier, because it was them kind of creating a pathway with their work with at Cytosista, because they have been engaging in Twitter chats that really helped us to see the possibilities. And so for us, we're like, okay, conference proposal, that was accepted. So we did the chat leading up to the conference proposal so that we could talk about the findings. And it really just blew up from there. So for us, starting this in 2017, and then we began to host monthly Twitter chats, right? So like the three of us would be in my spot in Athens, like literally all in the same room together, like responding to people, putting the questions out there. And we saw just this community space grow, where we had so many people who identified as first generation doctoral students, right? Because that was the focus, or aspiring, right? Or folks who had completed their degree coming together to build like this network of support. And so, like over the years, like it grew to, I think now we have over 12,000 followers on Twitter. Over time, it was probably like a few years in, we also incorporated virtual writing retreats, knowing how isolating the doctoral process is, the writing process, how isolating that can be. And, 40 to 60% of people who enter a doctoral degree do not finish. And there are many reasons for that. And, once you get to the dissertation phase, that's the most difficult, because when you were in coursework, you were with other people, you were engaging. Once you get to the dissertation, that's all you. And it is very hard, or it can be very hard for some people, right? It was hard for me. And so we really just wanted a space where folks can feel seen, where they can be celebrated. And so we are not active in terms of we're the ones doing the posting or chats or anything anymore, just because we've all finished school, we've transitioned to full-time work. So life just looks very different. But there are so many people who use the hashtag FirstGenDocs to communicate with each other. We've seen people who have added that to their bio to identify themselves as a first gen doc. And so it's just been really amazing, really humbling to be able to be a part of creating something that we had no clue would grow into what it grew into. And then even seeing over time how we had people, a couple of people from like outside of the US engaging too. So it was like, that's so dope to see.
Yeah. That's super dope. Like I think sometimes we don't realize how this, simple act of just like caring and showing up for each other can create this kind of cascade of support for people that you just never really even imagined this impacting and touching. So big ups to you all for one, wanting to create such a beloved space for yourself, and then two, having the desire and the willingness to share that with others around you. I can say for me, like I've played with the idea of getting a PhD. I refer to myself on something as like Dr. Jointed. And I'm just like, God, can I do this? God. That writing piece, can you speak a little bit more about that? Because I think that's probably my biggest thing. Like writing is not my ministry. I will give you this oral thing all day, but writing, like, no, I don't want to write this long 49, 89, 100 plus page anything ever. But
Yes.
that's a part of the process. So
Yeah. Okay. So, um, well, one thing I will share, a lot of first generation college students go to institutions that may not have doctoral degrees, right? It's more
Mhm.
comprehensive, maybe regional, but not necessarily like a research intensive institution. So they may not have the opportunities to serve on like a undergraduate research team or anything like that. Like I had never engaged in research. In my master's program, I did not take the option to do a research project. I'm like, nope, not
Mhm.
gonna do it. I did
I
like
ain't
the
got to, don't want to.
portfolio, right?
Uh-huh.
I did the
Come on,
portfolio where
portfolio.
I could talk about myself, about how I've grown as an educator through that process, and my vision for myself, right? My philosophy of higher ed, all of these things. I did that. And it was more creative, right? Not academic in nature. And so going into my doctoral program, I had never done research. So, one thing that I will say about my particular program at the time that I entered in the fall of 2015 was they required what we called a publishable paper. So, in a doctoral degree program, you have multiple milestones. Oftentimes, it will start with like your preliminary exams, which is an exam that really makes you share your knowledge, share what you gain, what you've learned over the course of time, and then you go into your dissertation. Some preliminary exams are also made to help you write the first few chapters of your dissertation.
Okay.
But my program had us do a research project before we even got to preliminary exams. So it was like a whole nother hurdle for me to get over. But it was small in nature, right? Like they only wanted it to be roughly 40 pages or so, because the intention behind it was that once you passed, um, so you have to do your prospectus, right? You talk about like the what you want to do, the type of research you do, a literature review, all of
Mhm.
that. And then we had to defend, which was an oral defense where we had a committee of people asking us questions about what we wanted to do. Once you um, passed your defense, then you could go on to do the research project. And so what they wanted was that for you to finish that and be able to submit it to a journal to publish it.
I
So
got
they didn't want it to be super long because, if it's really long, it might take you longer to submit, or maybe you never submit. Like I didn't submit mine until after I had finished the doctoral program. But anyway, doing that process was really helpful for me in building my confidence
it.
as it related to writing. Um, Also, in my doctoral program, we had like research teams where we would work with faculty members on the research that they were doing. So that was helpful with learning how to do different things like a literature review or doing an interview and things like that. And so, I feel like our program was really intentional with helping us to build the building blocks that we needed to get to that point of a dissertation. But yes, so there are different types of research. Many people fall into either qualitative, which tends to be more of talking to people, the stories, you're engaging with them in that way, or quantitative, which is more survey based,
Mhm.
where you send out a survey and then based on that, you I'm not a quant person, okay? So I did qualitative. Qualitative tends to be longer as well than a quantitative study. And then some people do mixed methods where it's a mix of both. Typically,
Mhm.
your faculty do not suggest that you do mixed methods because it just takes so much longer. And it's most important for you to finish and get something done, like save mixed methods for later on after you're done. Um, so you usually have a chair, which is your main advisor who is working with you through the process. They're the ones giving you feedback as you're sending them examples of your introduction, your literature review, and your methodology sections. And then again, you have to defend this in front of a committee of people that you choose. And so it's oral, right? They're asking you questions because they've read it and they want to know how you're planning to carry out the research. After that, You submit IRB in order for you to be able to do research
Research.
with human subjects, and then you move forward with data collection. And then the last parts of the dissertation are your finding sections and your discussion implications. And so it does wind up being long in the end. But what I will say is that your dissertation topic is a topic that you choose. Now, depending on the type of institution you go to, your research might need to align with faculty. At my
Mm,
institution, our research did not have to align with our faculty. So I was
okay.
extremely grateful for that. So, like for my publishable paper, for example, I did mine on Black college women and colorism and what is their experience with that and what messages they receive related to colorism and how that impacts their college experience. My advisor did not do any research on that, right? But he
Mhm.
was super supportive in that that regard. And so I was able to do research I wanted to do. For my dissertation, I
Mm,
focused on first generation Black women in doctoral programs and their persistence at a predominantly white institution.
mm,
So, oftentimes people say research is me search. A lot of times people identify topics, something related to themselves, but you're choosing a topic that you're passionate about, that you really care about. So it doesn't feel as daunting of a task to write because ultimately you're just putting the pieces together.
yeah.
And so I didn't feel like, oh my gosh, this is so long of a document. More so like literature reviews are a little more difficult for me. So that took very long. And so it can be tough, but if you choose a topic that you really love, it helps you to be able to get through that process because this is important work to you and you want to make sure that you can complete this and get it out there.
Like you gonna have me reconsidering and like picking out programs, and I was like, nope, I'm not gonna do it. I got two masters, and that is
Yeah.
enough. I got enough letters behind my name. That is enough. But
Look,
that little tam on this fro would be everything. I had to like Barbie pin that joint in. But
we can talk about it more.
right. Okay, I want to make sure that I'm respecting your time. And I have at least two more questions
Yeah,
that I
absolutely.
hope we can make time for. So my first question is for you. Like, what does the future of your work, your research, what does that look like for you?
So definitely continuing to focus on student success. So as I talked about early on, I really want to make sure that students can not only get to college, but that they can excel while in college and graduate, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that they're able to go into the field that they are most led, right, to go into.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's really important work for me, especially as it relates to students with minoritized identities, right? So I identify as a Black woman, first generation from a low income background. So those are three populations, students of color, first gen and low income, that I think a lot about. And, um, if you look at data at a lot of institutions, those tend to be the student populations where we see that there are gaps, right? And
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, it's about the opportunity, not about student achievement. So I think it's
Mm-hmm.
really important to reframe, right? Like this issue, this gap that we're seeing as an issue for the institutions, not an issue because of
Absolutely.
students. And
Absolutely.
so it's an opportunity gap, not an achievement gap. And
Absolutely.
so for me, I think about wanting to continue to do that work because that's really important to me. Continuing, of course, to speak to groups of students or to speak to leaders, whoever that might be, various financial coaching because I'm well. And it's research because on the administration thing, not required, right, as part of the work that I do. But
I think we missed a little piece
you
of
know,
that. I'm
when you
sorry, you
go
were going out.
through a doctoral program, you're socialized. Oh, okay. So I was saying, you know, as an administrator, research is not required, but I see myself as a scholar practitioner. And so research, I think, will always be a part of what I do. So little by little, continuing to engage in research around these topics and topics that are important to me.
Okay. Anybody that's still on, if you have any questions, this is definitely the time to drop your questions in the chat. Um, I'm like, do I have time for my second question? I don't know. Um, as you kind of navigated this journey, who or what do you feel was your like greatest champion? What was your North Star through your program?
Champions included my love, my forever love, my hubby. We met when I was in my doctoral program, and he was a huge supporter while in it. Like he came to all of my defenses, the oral defenses that I had to do for like publishable paper, you know, my dissertation, like all of that. So that was super important. Other champions, folks in my program, you know, we would get together, we would write together. You know, I had a really great community of support through my classmates and friends in my program, outside of the program, and faculty. And then, of course, family and friends, like folks, you know, even if people weren't like hadn't gone to college or whatever and didn't really understand quite what I was doing, like they were extremely supportive and encouraging me throughout the process. And so, like, support was extremely important for me in my own persistence, right? And even in the research that I did, right? Literature talks about that. The sister scholars who participated in my study talked about that as well. Like that support piece, extremely important. So finding a community of support is going to be necessary if
Absolutely.
you are, you know, thinking about pursuing a doctoral degree, because it's not a quick process, right? Like
Mhm.
undergrad is 4 years, that's long, right? If you go on and get a master's degree, a lot of times that's like two
Mhm.
years, maybe three, but like doctoral can take a long time. Typically, institutions might give you like up to 7 years or so before you
Yep.
have to, you know, request for an extension or things like that. If you work full time or if you have a family or other things, right, that you have to also prioritize, knowing that the road might be long. Some people in my program finished in 3 years as full-time students, and I knew that was something that I wasn't going to be able to do, right? I know I
Mm.
needed more time. So knowing that it's going to take some time, just make sure you have that community of support, that your family, you know, whoever you're with on a day-to-day basis is really supportive of you as well.
I'm like, I got so many more questions, but I'm not going to ask all my questions. You and I definitely will talk, continue to talk offline about PhDs and just this pursuit of more knowledge, of more resources. We do have a question. Does first gen count if a person does not graduate? Um,
I
does
mean,
first gen count?
so going into college, like if you're the first generation, right, your parent or guardian before you did not complete a degree before you entered, you're still a first generation college student, right? If you didn't graduate, then you're just not a first generation college graduate, but you would be considered first generation. And so I would say if you do decide to go back to continue pursuing your degree, see what resources your institution may have for first generation college students, or if there are scholarships out there that require you to be first generation, you would identify as that.
Um, first of all, let me again just thank you so much for your time and just thoroughness to this work. Again, I having gone to college at a PWI that like I understand, right? But this was so informative, right? Even though I've gone down this road, I've traveled the master's road, right? Twice. And so like, but this still was just so informative to the process, to what I can then do to support other young people um going on this journey or even considering this journey, and not even just young people. I'm even thinking about older folks who are going back to school. My sister, for example, is wrapping up her MBA. She is
Nice.
graduating in like 30 plus days with an MBA, right?
That's
And just
awesome.
how I can support her, my best friend who is graduating in June, right? And how I can continue to support him in his academic journey. So just thank you so much for this just wealth of knowledge and information about the journey and about the process of PhDs, because I will say it definitely feels a bit more attainable, right? I love the
Mhm.
vulnerability that you had in this conversation about, just like not feeling like you deserve to be there. I think about when I went to Jane Addams to get my master's in social work. I was the only Black person in my full-time
Mhm.
program. And so I felt so much anxiety. I was having panic attacks all the time, right? So I just appreciate your willingness to be vulnerable and share that, because I think we need to normalize that feeling for folks of color as we are entering those spaces. And I think it's equally important for our white counterparts to create a safe space too, to also
Mhm.
be understanding and knowledgeable that that is our experience in this space, and
Mhm.
challenging them to what are you going to do, right? Everybody want to be woke, right? But like, how you gonna pull up, right? What are you really gonna do to
Yeah.
support and create that safe space?
And I think to add to that too, it's normal to feel like that and know that it's not you. It's the environment, right? That was not created for you to
Right,
begin with.
right.
And so it's an issue with the structure, right? And so holding people accountable, the institution
Come on.
accountable, because like I said, we can't recruit students to institutions and then do nothing to support them once they're there to ensure that they're able to have a great holistic experience.
And again, shout out to the trio programs, the upper bound programs. Shout out to all of those organization and partners that are making way and making space for our young people to be present on campus. Before we get out of here, how can people connect with you?
Yeah, so you can connect with me on IG, on Twitter. My handle is at LCB underscore PhD. I'm on LinkedIn as well, so you could just search me, Lamesha Brown, and find me there. I also have a website if you're interested in learning more about me, and if you'd like to hire me to be a speaker or a consultant, you can check out my website at lameshabrown.com. I am also an adjunct instructor. So if you are looking for an educator in your higher ed and student affairs program, you can reach out to me.
And if you are not, but you know somebody who is, and you know somebody who works in higher ed, send them this video along with all of those tags so that they can contact Dr. Brown. If you are, or someone you know is in charge of, or managing, or supporting programs and resources for their students, please pass this video so that they can do work with both investor consultant firm and Dr. Brown. Um, Lamisha, thank you so much for being
Yes,
part of this
thank
conversation.
you.
I and my team are so grateful to you for just sharing so much information. For those of you who are just tuning in, or you may have missed us in the front, I am Tanisha Jointer. I am the founder of Investor Consultant Firm. You can follow us on Instagram at Investor Consultant Firm. You can check out our work online. I actually was doing a training today, and the guy told me you really need to do a better job of updating your LinkedIn's. People need to know what you're doing. So I will start updating on LinkedIn, folks. But I just appreciate you so much. And I'm going to turn it over to you for our final word. What is, again, however you want to close us out, just wanted to give you the opportunity to end us off. And again, thank you to our audience, too. Shout out to all y'all for supporting.
Yeah, so first, thank you to you, Tanisha. Thank you to the team for the invitation and all the things to prepare for this opportunity. I will say thank you to those of you who are currently watching live, or if you're watching this back, thanks for engaging throughout this whole session. I think just kind of for final words, I'd like to encourage anyone who is interested in pursuing a graduate degree, especially at the doctoral level, and you feel like there is something that you're super passionate about and work that you really want to do, I encourage you to just do it. Like, life is short. There have been so many things going on in the world, right? But know that you are capable. You have everything that you need already
Mm,
inside of you to be able to accomplish this thing. And that there is support out there for you to be able to continue on in those tough times where you might be questioning your ability to do so. So just know at whatever level of education that you are at, that you are smart, that you are capable, that you are qualified,
mm.
and that you are able to achieve whatever it is that you have set before you. So do it.
I'm like Nike. But don't block us, Nike, and don't try to get no money from us 'cause we ain't got no money. Um, yep. All right. And with that, thank you guys so much. We'll be here again tomorrow. Aja Simmons will be joining us tomorrow. So if you have time, tune in the same time, 5 o'clock. We will be here with Aja Simmons, who is a phenomenal educator, making history in the world of social and emotional learning out in California and even across the country. So if you're tuning in today, please check us out tomorrow. Please share this video with your family, friends, folks who are considering college, thinking about college, ain't even thought about college yet. And I bid you all good night. Thank you so much.
Bye.